Okay, the biggest talk right now is about exit velocity, and one of the key thoughts behind exit velocity, the hitting gurus and the scientists would have us believe that it's all about bat speed. Now, bat speed's crucial, don't get me wrong, but when we watch this swing, his bat speed is pretty much exactly what it is when he hits a ball 450 feet. But the ball this time just barely makes it over the shortstop's head. And so it can't just be all about bat speed. There's also a factor that happens that I'm going to refer to as absorption. In other words, at the moment of impact, depending on who you listen to, the scientists would argue this, I think, but at the point of impact, one of the scientists that I've heard talk in the past says that there's about 2,000 pounds of pressure or energy or force at the moment of impact. I'm not sure what the exact proper term is, but there's a lot of energy on the ball. And that energy is going to do one of two things. It's either going to go right back to the ball, or some of it's going to be lost at impact, and it's going to be absorbed into part of the body. So at the moment that this contact happens, watch his hands and watch this part of the bat, how it jumps back into his hand. It goes from the middle of his hand here, and the second the ball hits, tremendous bow in the bat itself, but it jumps right back into his hand. And so much of that speed, much of that energy on the ball is going to go right into his hands. Everywhere where there's a weak spot, and a weak spot in hitting is, number one, the lead arm is bent. And so that's immediately going to make the bat speed a little bit less than normal. But it's not going to be a lot less. It's probably going to be 3 or 4, possibly 5 miles an hour less than normal whenever the lead arm bends. But the other major factor that happens when the lead arm bends is that now you have two different fulcrums. You have this fulcrum because you've got levers that are involved. You've got the lever that's the bat, you got the lever that's the forearm. Those two form this. If his lead arm was locked out right now, and then the barrel was here, there would be a different angle. We would have an angle that would be closer to 90 degrees, but we'd have one lever which would be made up of the lead arm, the whole lead arm, the upper arm, and the forearm. And then you would have the bat. And so the angle automatically changes whenever the lead arm stays straight, locked out. But now, as soon as this bends, it means that the forearm is now the lever that we're dealing with, and the bat creates an angle that's like 120 degrees. Even if we go all the way back to like here, where he should be well below 90 degrees in order for it to be at maximum, but we're not. We're at about 100 degrees, or a little bit more than that. Now, granted, these measurements are not exact, but they do give us a pretty good idea. It's clear that he's not at 90 degrees with that forearm and with the lead bat. So he's lost a little bit of bat speed when it comes to that as well, because those two things together are going to create a slightly slower swing speed than if it's completely locked out, the lead arm, and that angle is at its max. But what I think is the most interesting is that if bat speed is really everything, then this really shouldn't happen. We shouldn't see the exit speed go down so dramatically. Now, I realize that the end of the bat is traveling at one speed, and the sweet spot of the bat is traveling at a slightly slower speed. And the part where he's hitting the bat is quite a bit slower than the end of the bat. There's no question about that. And so the bat speed that we're talking about is lower. There's no question right here. And that's part of the reason why the ball comes off of the bat slower. But the other part of this equation is how much of that energy is lost going into his hands, going into a bent lead arm, possibly a bent front knee. Anywhere where there's a place where the energy can go, it's going to try to look for that spot. And if he hits the ball off the end of the bat, the same basic thing is going to